Right then, our starting point tonight are four little letters that you're likely to hear a lot about, at least in the course of the year. The CFTA, the Continental Free Trade Area. But the question is, will this deal, like so many others before it, like the 2001 Abuja Declaration on Health Expenditure or the 1999 Yamoussoukro decision on aviation, simply implode? If it is to avoid that fate, the CFTA has to deal with several challenges. But let's start with a broad structure. Just by the number of countries that will be joining it, African states effectively will be creating a massive free trade area right across the board. We're talking about 54 states with a combined population of about 1 billion people and GDP worth at least $2 trillion. That is a lot of money, whichever way you cut it. But for all of these countries to work together at a minimum, they need common standards. Now, this is a huge problem in sectors like agriculture. For instance, Kenya and South Africa, they're both huge maize consumers. But over 70% of the maize grown in South Africa is genetically modified. It is therefore by law barred from being exported into Kenya, which will not take it. So if the CFTA has genetically modified maize as its base standard, therefore, will the Kenyans up in East Africa, or any other country for that matter, feel disenfranchised? Now that example points to yet another problem here. You cannot ignore the politics and the politics of trade. Some countries in regional trade blocs, you name them, COMESA, the East African Community, the Southern African Development Community as well, all of these to a certain extent have been reluctant to integrate ever deeper. For example, over the last decade, Kenya has asked COMESA 6 times for permission to retain high tariffs against sugar imports, effectively blocking imports from other African sugar producers like Uganda and Mauritius. And every single time, Kenya's government says it needs more time to reform its sugar sector. Those reforms have not happened. The third, however, and most important challenge is a lack of infrastructure, which according to the World Bank will take nearly $100 billion a year of expenditure to fix. Take Nigeria, for example. It is sub-Saharan Africa's biggest producer of tomatoes. It churns out about 1.5 million metric tons of the stuff every year. But over 50% of that harvest is lost every year, in part just because farmers can't get it off their farms and onto your table. So yes, clearly, there's a lot of work to be done. But if the dream of a continental free trade area is to come true, it won't happen until African states solve these 3 basic, fundamental problems of standards, politics, and infrastructure as well. So that is the macro picture. Let's now focus on individual states, starting with Nigeria. An agreement to formally establish the CFTA is due sometime this year, and that deal is forecast to significantly boost trade volumes if implemented to the letter. Here's Sophia Adengo with a Nigerian perspective on the deal.
And then we can get them stacked up here.
Ofor Ali runs a medium-sized business supplying renewable energy products like solar panels and light fixtures here in Abuja. 3 years ago, Ali relocated from Canada to Nigeria to invest. He's now looking to expand across the continent, but says the ease of doing business in Nigeria alone is a challenge.
We are facing challenges, but most of the challenges we face, even with the current economic challenges, are disadvantageous to indigenous and genuine Nigerian local companies. The markets, the policies, the practices, the expectations, even from the government, the accountability required, even for tax. It's far difficult for somebody who decides to stay here for the long term.
The African Union could help businesses like Ali's grow through the proposed Continental Free Trade Agreement, CFTA, aimed at creating a free trade zone to boost trade between African countries, and one that is hoped to positively impact African economies, stimulating growth. Some analysts are optimistic about potential revenues under the policy.
Look at the significant amount of trade that happens in West Africa that goes to Europe. What that also means is that such an amount can also go to the rest of Africa. So you will be looking at Africa supporting Africa without looking for aid.
Questions have arisen as to whether the trade measures may work in practice with infrastructure gaps and custom unions and the protection of local manufacturers competing with more superior foreign companies, all still hanging in the balance.
Although these detailed regulations remain of concern, forecasts are positive.
the only way forward to the explosion and development of Africa is those steps that will bring down the borders, ensure free trade, ensure free movement, and ensure that Africans know each other. I think that's the only way forward.
For businesses like Ofor Ali's, future profits may lay in forging a path towards African markets, and the CFTA may be crucial for that.